Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're very lucky. We have two amazing speakers from Israel that are going to speak to us about a wonderful and very special organization that is devoting, people are devoting their time and energy after losing a loved one to the conflict between Palestinians and Israelis, instead of for rage and hate, to compassion and coexistence. We have a Palestinian from Jericho, which is the first town in the West Bank to be part of the Palestinian Authority, Bassam Aramin, and we have a Israeli Jew. I don't know if Gili Meisler sees himself as an Israeli Jew. I will let him maybe say that, but an Israeli Jew, Gili Meisler. Both of them have experienced loss. Both of them have experienced reactions of hate and rage that turned into positive energy of compassion and love and kindness, and creating bridges between Jews and Palestinians in the Middle East. So I'm going to turn it soon to them. I just want to say that if you, that they will first share their personal story and some other issues about themselves, and then we will open it for questions. If you have a question, put it on the chat. We will not open microphones of participants to ask the question, but just chat it, and Matt will be seeing that, and Matt is here as Matt ask a question, so he will be asking, and hopefully he will be able to address some or most of the questions, but if not, hopefully we'll be able to have the guests here more than just this time. So with that in mind, please, Bassam and Gili, if you would like to share your stories at this time, please.
Yeah, sure. Bassam, I will start as usual.
Especially you have a birthday today.
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for inviting us, and for me it's kind of a special meeting today because of several reasons. Yeah, I have a birthday. I'm 60 years old today, but I think the main reason why I feel it's a special for me, it's because of, can I call you Chupi?
Stick to Rabbi David.
Rabbi David, okay. Me and Rabbi David know each other from grade A1, and when Rabbi David asked after, I think it was after the memorial ceremony we do with the Israeli-Palestinian Memorial Eve, and I asked if it's possible that Bassam will be my partner. I didn't do a dialogue. I've done many times dialogue meetings. This is a dialogue meeting. This is what we call a dialogue meeting. For a long time I didn't do. So I asked Bassam, which is my, used to be my partner for dialogue meetings, used to be my boss. Bassam was one of the, he was for many years the spokesman of the PCFF, and I will tell you a little bit about our organization. And he also was the Palestinian general manager about 2 years ago. So let me tell you what we'll do today. First, just for a few minutes, I will tell you a little bit about us, about our organization, and then each one of us will share with you our personal story. I will begin, and then Bassam will be after me. And then it's time for questions, for saying anything you feel. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid to ask anything you want. Me, especially Bassam, have heard it all. So our organization was actually an idea of a person. His name is Yitzhak Frankenthal, Orthodox Jew. In 1995, his son, Eric, hitchhiked from his army base towards his home. And for a day, almost 2 days, nobody heard or saw him. And then they found his body. It turns out that he hitchhiked and went into a car. The driver and the guy next to him looked like Jews, Israelis with kippah, and actually they murdered him. It turned out that they were from Hamas. And while the 7 days of grief, the Shiva, Yitzhak, the father, decided that he must do something with the pain he feels, and that it should be something towards reconciliation and talk and not hate. And then he thought about this idea about our organization. It took him several weeks and then several months to find more bereaved. At the beginning, it was parents, and then so this is our name, the Families Forum Parents Circle, but actually we are brothers and sisters and wives and kids. And in 1998, they decided to open the organizations also to Palestinians. It's funny to say, and it's funny to think about it today, that actually the first Palestinian members came from Gaza. Of course, after 2000 and 2001, when Hamas took over, we actually lost our connections with those members. In 2000 and 2001, many Palestinians from the West Bank became members. And the main focus of our organization is trying to set maybe as a model, like if we that lost our dear ones can be together and can talk with each other, and so everybody can. I can talk a lot about us, but I will not. I just want to mention maybe our two main activities. The first one is what we call dialogue meetings, and this is exactly what we are doing now. Actually, the Corona let us adjust ourselves and using Zoom. Usually it's physical meetings. We started doing that in the year 2000, and mainly in high schools, mainly in Israel. And also we are invited many times abroad, and different groups and delegations who come to Israel. So we did in all those years about almost 6,000 such meetings. average every year 500, sometimes more, sometimes less. So this is our main activity. The other activity that I want to share with you, we call it the Parallel Narrative Project. What we do is we take 15 Israelis and 15 Palestinians that they share all something in common, like their profession. So we had groups that they were all lawyers or doctors or journalists or grandmothers or youth, etc., etc. Until today, we had already, since we started at 10, 12 years ago, we had already more than 40 or 40, almost 45 such groups. And what they do is that they meet for several months, every few weeks, sometimes also in weekends. And they share their personal and their national narrative. The peaks of the project is that in one day they all go to Yad Vashem. This is an opportunity for the Palestinians to see, to share, to learn about the most traumatic event in the Jewish history. And in another day, they all go to one of the almost 500 destroyed villages, Arab villages. And that's an opportunity for the Israelis to learn about the Nakba, about the catastrophe the Palestinians had in 1948, 47, 48. So just before I finish talking about us, I just want to say that I will be really very happy if you will go and visit our website, theparentcircle.org. We have a great website in 3 languages, English, Hebrew, and Arabic. Please sign to our newsletter. If you wish, you can contribute us money because we always need that. And you can follow us on our Facebook and Instagram, etc. So that's it about us. If you will have questions, more questions about our organization, please ask at the end. So I will start with my personal story. So my name is Gili. I was born in 1961 in Jerusalem. Let me tell you a little bit about my parents. They came from the USSR 3 years before I was born in 1958 with my only brother. He was 4 years old, and they set themselves in a very small and modest apartment in Jerusalem, 1 living room and 2 bedrooms. Me and my brother in the same room, most of the time fighting, 7 years difference between the two of us. And my father was a mathematician. He was actually quite famous. After some years, he was a very well-known lecturer in the Hebrew University. And my mother, it took her some time to learn Hebrew. My father was Zionist, and from birth, his parents he knew Hebrew fluently from very young age. My mother not, but she had a very, very unique voice, and she started to work in the Israeli radio in the Russian department. It was a special department that was aired or broadcasted to those Jews who were left in the USSR. If you know, like my parents went out just before the gates were closed, and all since 1960 until 1970, Jews were not allowed to go outside of Russia. They were not allowed to talk Hebrew, to listen to Hebrew. They used to listen to this radio secretly. And she became a very, very famous broadcaster. She had amazing radio shows, different shows about the history and the archaeological and the music and Israeli music and etc. etc. She didn't use her real name because she still had her brother living in Russia, and she didn't want that he will have problems. And I can tell you that in the beginning of the 70s, when the gates were opened and many Jews came to Israel, made Aliyah, many of them, like the first place they went was the Western Wall, and the second place they came to the radio looking for my mother. So I don't have anything special to tell you about my childhood. In 1972, my brother was 18 years old. He finished his high school and he joined the army. His main subject in high school was Arabic and Islam studies. He knew how to speak, how to read, how to write Arabic very well. As today, also at that time, they used to take those people to the intelligence, but my brother didn't want to because he wanted to be a fighter. And that time it was kind of a prestige to be at the tanks. So he joined the armed corps, the tanks unit. And a little bit more than a year after that, one day in Yom Kippur, like this Yom Kippur was, my brother was supposed to come for, it was Friday and Saturday, and he's supposed to come. We are not a religious family. Actually, we are atheists. My mother made food and then everything prepared for his coming. And then he rang us by the phone, and he told, it was Thursday evening, and he told us that he will not be able to come. He didn't explain why. He wanted to talk with me, but I refused because in the last time he was at home, in Rosh Hashanah, it was, we had a fight, and I was still very angry of him. And that's it. And then, on Friday, everybody saw like it's Yom Kippur, but all of a sudden, many cars in the street, and then Saturday, and then there is nobody who lived that time in Israel that will forget this moment. About 10 minutes before 2 p.m., all of a sudden, siren, and the Yom Kippur War, or the 1973 war, began when Syria from the north, Egypt from the south, attacked Israel simultaneously. I can tell you a lot, but I don't want to make this story too long. Time passed, few days and a week and 10 days and 2 weeks, and we didn't hear anything from Giora. Giora is the name of my brother. And then my parents started to be, worried. They started to make phone calls to other parents of his friends. Maybe they heard something. And until the last day of the war, which was in October 24th, we didn't hear anything. On October 29th, one day, and until then, my parents, they were in all the hospitals in Israel. My mother worked, with journalists in the radio, and they asked them to maybe they have some information and et cetera, but we really didn't hear anything from him. And until October 29th, when one day one of his best friends called us at evening time, and he got just few hours leave because he had to be at home with his mother because it was the 30th day after his father passed away, just a few days before the war began, so they let him go home. And then when he came home, he started to ask his mother, how's this? And then she told him, about Giora, nobody heard. And he said, how come? It's impossible. I met him in October 15th. Giora was with a jerrycan of water and a towel, and we spoke for a few minutes. And then he called my parents and told them this story. Now, that time, there were about 1,500 MIAs, missing in actions. But most of those MIAs, it was just because of a terrible mess and not organized. And then for the first time in the army, they established the MIA unit, which was not, wasn't such a unit before the 73 war. And started to investigate at every case. And then this list shrank to a few hundreds. And then they started to investigate, and they called this friend of him, and they hypnotized him several times, and he insisted on his story. And things happened that after some time, this case was quite famous also in the media. I'm talking about first page headline in the newspaper, and maybe this case became like he was the most famous MIA from the Yom Kippur War. They investigated, but they didn't really have any information. Now let me pause for a minute and say this, that before the war, I was 12 years old. I wasn't interested in politics in any way. I didn't read newspaper. I read newspaper, only the sports column. But after the war, quite immediately after the war, I really became like the opposite. I was very much involved, and I was, and then I started to get, inside lots of pain and angry, and I started to, I hated all the Arabs. I looked for revenge. That year we studied Arabic. I refused to go into the classes, and I started to join different movements. I don't know if I guess some of you know about Arav Kahana and the Kach movement. So I guess I was one of the youngest members in that movement. And in Jerusalem, there were so many demonstrations against the government, and I think I was in every one of them. And time passed. After the end of the year, like towards the summer, now we're talking about the summer of '74. My father, like living in our apartment was really impossible because every day, every evening, so many people came. Neighbors. My father had a lot of students all over the years. My brother had lots of friends from different schools, from different places. Friday and Saturday was like a train station. So my father decided that we must have a change, and we took a sabbatical year, and we moved for 1 year to Canada, to Toronto. Why Toronto? Because we had far relatives, but very close people. One of them is here, Batsheva, Susie, and they helped us to get organized, found us a small apartment, registered me to Hebrew school, and all my 8th grade I was in Toronto. Don't have too much to say about that year, just that one day towards the end of the year, in June, the secretary opened the door and said, "Gili, please go home. Your parents are calling you." And I went, and there I saw a person came from he came from the Washington embassy, and told us that your son, your brother, was his body was identified in 90-something%. We're talking before the DNA days, and day after that, we got on a plane and got back to Israel. And after a day, there was a headline in the newspaper, the mystery of the tank. Like I skipped and didn't tell you that there was another mystery. The tank that my brother was in, at that time they already knew the number of the tank, etc. They didn't find it actually until today. This is the only tank in all of the history of IDF, in all the wars, that there is no any information about what happened to it. And there was a huge funeral, and but actually people weren't sure. Was it really his body, or maybe they just want to bury the story? I will say just in that I made a personal documentary that was out in 2009. The name of the documentary is Fireflies. And I will not tell you anything about the film. If you wish, you can find it in my website. If you do fireflies.co.il, you will find it. And I opened it to see it. But I'm telling you this because I just wanted to say that at that time, when I made the film, while the production, I interviewed so many people, and like my parents' colleagues and friends and family and neighbors, actually nobody believed that it was actually his body. Then we came back to Toronto, and then we came after just 2 or 3 weeks. We closed our business there and got back to Israel. They signed me to a high school, to the very best high school in Jerusalem. The only reason they accepted me was because the manager was a student of my father. Otherwise, there's no way they accepted me. And let me just say this, that during my 9th grade, I continued my, let's say, political activities. By myself, I established a youth movement, very right-wing. One day I wrote something, and then I went to a print workshop, and on my expense, I printed a few thousands of flyers. And from time to time, I used to wake up very early in the morning, waiting different high schools, handing over this flyer. And then after several weeks, we had a few dozens, like 30, 40, sometimes 50 people from students, high school students. We met every Monday, and we did some activities, etc., etc. I didn't tell you that, but when I told you about our 3-room apartment, it was my parents' dream to move, to find another apartment. Before the war, the reason was because me and my brother were fighting all the time. So they really wanted an apartment with another room that they could separate us. After the war, the reason was that after we came from Canada, it was so difficult for my mother, especially for her, to go inside our room, and she used to cry the minute she got in. So after 3 years, like a year after we came back from Canada, one day they told me, listen, we are moving, we found another apartment. We moved just a few blocks where a nicer building, 3rd floor, 4 rooms. My father had his working room. Then it was the summer between my 9th and 10th grade, and I started to smoke from time to time, cigarettes. And one day I went down, and our gardener, who used to come 2 or 3 times a week, taking care of the garden, cleaning the stairs, he called me and offered me a cigarette, and I took a cigarette. And what's your name? What's your name? His name is Ali, from Eastern Jerusalem. And we talked a little bit, and then we said goodbye. And the day after, he called me again, and it became like a habit. Every day, every morning, we have our cigarette, our quality time, talking about life. Then I went out of this meeting with him every time, telling to myself, what's going on here? He's Arab. How come I'm talking to an Arab? And I think this was a huge change in my life, because it made me think. I refuse to be that kind of person who hates all the Arabs, who hates all the blacks or women or I don't know. I'm not that kind of person. And then I think the first thing that happened is that I stopped going to those meetings of the movement I made. And then I started, that time we didn't have Wikipedia or Google or I don't know, but I started to ask questions. I started to learn about the Palestinians, and I started to ask myself, how come we have our state and they don't have a state? And that's it. It really changed my life. Me and Ali kept for many years in connection. He was with his wife in my wedding. For many years I didn't see him, but I planned to. And that's it. This is my personal story. But let me just say one thing, because of, what, I will say that later. So please let me introduce Bassam. Bassam, you're on mute. And Bassam will, please.
Thank you, Gili. I will try to be brief. I think, Gili, you committed to a big mistake that you didn't learn Arabic. Because the first thing I learned when I was in jail, I was for 7 years, that if you know your enemy, you can defeat him or you can kill him. If you only hate him, you will kill yourself. This is what pushed me to study Hebrew, which takes me to another word. So I am the Palestinian by chance. It's not my guilt. I born to a Palestinian family, in a small family. We are 16 brothers and sisters only. At the age of 13, I found myself as a fighter or a warrior by raising the Palestinian flag, which was a crime at that time, against the Israeli soldiers, just to make them nervous or crazy. We are a group of 5 kids, and as I said, our goal is to make them crazy, not to create a Palestinian state. We don't understand that. We need to feel safe in our neighborhood, in our village near Hebron. At the age of 16, we find some old weapons in a cave with 2 grenades and Kalashnikov and other military materials that we don't know how to use it. But 2 of my friends throw the 2 grenades on the Israeli patrols, soldiers in our village near Hebron. And of course, in that time, no one killed, no one injured, because they don't know how to use it in a professional way. At the age of 17, we have been arrested. So the first one gets 21 years in jail, 19, 15, 14, and I get 7 years. It's a long 7 years. Briefly, I watched a movie about the Holocaust in jail. And I don't know what you know that we know about the Holocaust. Even until today, after 73 years, the mass majority of the Palestinians, I believe of the Arabs, many Muslims, we think it's a big lie, especially when we talk about 6 millions. My small mind in that time, as a very young villager, I don't expect from me to know what's the meaning of the Holocaust, but I know that someone called Hitler killed 6 million Jews, but it's a big lie. It's not true. In fact, I want to enjoy seeing this movie as kind of revenge, to see this huge or big Hitler, how he killed 6 million Jews, even if it's a big lie, just to enjoy, see someone torture them, occupy them, at least because I am in their jails. In fact, after a few minutes, I found myself crying. Get sympathy with those innocent people. In fact, I'm not built to see such atrocities. I say to myself, it's just a movie, nothing like this in the reality. And I don't believe that there are human beings can do the same to other human beings. Briefly, I want to know more about this big lie. If it's really happened or it's just a movie. It takes many years, even after I get released. Before 10 years only, in 2010, 2011, I make my master degree about the Holocaust in Bradford University in the UK. Then it was like a tool to know your enemy in order to know how to defeat him. Then you find yourself in a different place. Then you understand that if you know more, you act better. If you don't know, so you are a victim to yourself, to your education. You always agree with yourself, which is very easy. I go back to jail. In jail, it's a long 7 years. It's a very difficult 7 years. Briefly, their goal is to kill our humanity every moment because we are the bad guys. And for us, they are not our examples. We are freedom fighters. We need to survive to protect our humanity in order to continue our way, our struggle, to release our country and ourselves and to live in peace and democracy in our state. You know, you are not living alone in this world. And of course, I get released in 1992 after 7 years, but I still believe in armed struggle as the only way to talk to those people. When I say people, I mean the jailers, the Israeli army, and the settlers, those that are the Israelis or the Jews that the Palestinians know even until today. Then after that, we have Oslo Agreement for the first time between PLO and Israel. Suddenly we have peace. So I get married because this is the normal thing to do if you have peace and you live in a normal situation. Then I discovered that I put myself in other jail forever with my own hands. And I start to have kids. And suddenly I have 6 kids, which is worse than the Israeli occupation. To have 6 kids together, you know, it's a big responsibility. In this case, your family, they become my Palestine, my Eretz Israel, my world. And I want to do everything possible to protect them, which is impossible mission. Unfortunately, if you live in Palestine and Israel, maybe it's not in the same level, but still you have no safe place for yourself, even until today. And sometimes if you survive, it's only by chance, not because you are a wise man, which is not a normal life. In one day, it's a long process, but sometimes in one point you need to say, that's it. So I decided in 1993, 94, that I'm not going to use or support armed struggle because it doesn't work simply, and because we use it. I discovered that more than 100 years, we are trying to kill each other, to defeat each other, Israelis and Palestinians. Until now, Israel is not safe, and until now, Palestine is not free, but more blood, more pain, more victims, and we didn't achieve anything. So maybe through negotiations, what happened in Oslo, for example, maybe we can achieve such agreement or peace agreement. So then you start to ask yourself, after after Oslo agreement, Arafat and Rabin in the White House. So why I spent 7 years in jails? If we can achieve such agreement 20 years before, we will save thousands of lives from both sides. Briefly, I start to be active in my society in the Palestinian side that we need to change our way to achieve the same goal. It's to end the Israeli occupation. We will never change it, by the way, even after 3,000 years. But how? How to end it? I don't think that to send a suicide bomber to Israel is a real message from the Palestinians to the Israelis. It's our common enemy. If there is no occupation, we don't need to kill each other. This is what I understand in that time. In 2002, 2003, I hear in the Israeli media about something called refuseniks, which is ex-Israeli soldiers and officers who refuse to serve in the occupied territories. I wish to meet them And 2 years later, in 2005, we have the first meeting between 4 Palestinians, ex-prisoners. I was one of them, with 7 ex-Israeli soldiers and officers. You can imagine it was the most difficult meeting for each one of us. We know each other. We don't trust each other. We hate each other. And we did our best to kill each other physically from both sides. Briefly, it takes 1 year meetings. We become 300 members. And in the end of this year, 2005, we create a movement. We call it Combatants for Peace. And our slogan was what Nelson Mandela says. If you want to make peace with your enemy, you need to work with your enemy. Then he became your partner. So this was our goal, to create a partnership between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Of course, we start to talk, we start to learn about each other. And 2 years later, in fact, in the 16th of January 2007, an Israeli border police teenager, 18 and a half, shot and killed my 10 years old daughter, Abir, in front of her school from a distance of 15 to 20 meters in her head from the back. She fell down, and 2 days later, she passed away in Hadassah Hospital where she born, which is the most difficult thing it could happen to anyone on earth. Especially Abir wasn't a fighter. She's just 10 years old. She don't know anything about the conflict. And I want to teach my kids to know the enemy in the other side in early age, not like me. The first meeting I was 37, I think. So my 4 kids, they participate in 2 summer camps with Israelis to let them understand that in the other side, they are just kids like them. Not all the Israelis are soldiers in the checkpoints that they saw. Like less than 1 hour, I have more than 30 Israeli families who stay with me 3 days in the hospital praying for Abir. Unfortunately, she cannot survive. From the first moment, I said that I wish Abir will be the last victim between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. In fact, I joined the parents' circle 2 days after I lost Abir because I know them 2 years before. One of the Israeli members of Combatants for Peace, the co-founders, was a bereaved brother. He lost his Smadar Hanan, his sister. She was 14 years old. We become very close friends through the 2 years. So I know this organization. I know this noble people. But in my worst dream, of course, I don't want to join this amazing group because the ticket is very high. As my brother Gili mentioned, that it's the only organization on earth that didn't seek new members. We don't want to grow. It's a long process, you know, it's a long process to change yourself. As Jalaluddin Rumi says, yesterday I was clever, so I start to change the world. Today I am wise, so I start to change myself. But it takes many years, a long process to make peace with yourself and to understand that you have no enemies to conquer and no one can occupy you. You are released from your hate to others because they are the others. So when I met the victim who killed my daughter after 3.5 years in the Israeli court, I said to him, I need you to know that you are not a hero, you are not a warrior, you didn't kill the enemy or the terrorists, you just killed 10 years innocent girl. And if you are proud of yourself, you can enjoy your crime. I don't ask for revenge because I don't take revenge from victims. For me, you are not less victim than your victim. But in any day in your life, if you come to ask me to forgive you, always you will find me there. I will forgive you, but it's not because of yourself. It's because of myself, because I really love my daughter very much. And because I have another 5 kids, I don't want them to grow up as victims to you. They deserve to grow up in a different way. In fact, in the parent circle, circle, we are more than 620 families. All of them lost a beloved one. We have all the right to hate each other, even to try to kill each other. But remember, because we love our kids, because we love our brothers and sisters and relatives, because we are patriots, we raise our voice to say no more blood, because we have no fear, because the worst already happened to us, and we understand that our lives, our kids, is more important than any holy stone in the Holy Land. So we want to spread a very simple message that we can be partners. We don't need to love each other, by the way, but through our relationship, through our personal relationship, we prove that we can be partners, real partners. We can be friends, we can be brothers, and we can be family if we understand that our lives is more important than Jerusalem. Believe me, you know, we love Jerusalem. It's a holy place for the Christians. It's a holy place for the Jewish people. It's the paradise for the Muslims. If you ask any Muslim around the world, he wished to die in Jerusalem because we believe that the paradise will be there. It's a matter of faith. You cannot argue with it. But I want to say that because we love Jerusalem, we're fond of Jerusalem, but we kill each other for Jerusalem and we meet each other under Jerusalem. And I am not sure if Jerusalem know who we are. This is our message. Our humanity become above the conflict. We care about the Israelis as we care about the Palestinians, because I believe we need to share this land. You know, you call it Eretz Israel or the Promised Land. We call it our Promised Land, the Islamic land, or Palestine. We need to share the same land as one state, or two states, or 5 states. Otherwise, we will share the same land as 2 big graves to our kids, our families, our people. I don't believe that the Israelis will give up their safe place after, you know, your history, 3,000 years of slavery and discrimination and the Holocaust and the anti-Semitism. And I promise you that the Palestinians, after 3,000 years, they will never, ever accept the Israeli control or the Israeli occupation or the Israeli oppression, whatever you call it. We need to survive together as free human beings. Thank you very much for listening.
Bassam and Gili, thank you very much. If anybody has any questions for Bassam or Gili, please put them in the chat. I'd like to start out with one for Bassam. Bassam, did the man that you said that you would be there to forgive him, the man who killed your daughter, did he ever ask forgiveness of you?
Not directly. It's a very complicated issue, especially in the Israeli army network, because the state officially said we are not responsible. So he didn't have the courage personally in that time to come and to say, no, I kill your daughter. But we have, like we were in a process even in that time to meet each other. And I said to him, you can meet me in the Israeli channel 1 or 2 or 13. And in a live broadcast, you said, I kill your daughter. I ask for forgiveness, and I will say in front of the millions, in a perfect Hebrew, go, you are free, I forgive you. So he wasn't ready, imagine, in that time, and I understand that, of course. But you know, what's my goal? To meet him. I want to ask him why. It's an open question forever. What doesn't say like to kill 10 years innocent girl without regret? For that, I consider him a victim. Of course, he's a victim. He's not a serial killer. He's not a monster. He's 18 and a half. And I know the type of environment, the history. I understand that it's not an easy thing to be a Jew, not in Israel, even in the States, in France today, in Europe. So I understand this reality. for me, I said, if he come to ask me to forgive him on his knees, I will take my revenge by forgiving him without any mercy. My goal, we need to understand that you kill 10 years innocent girl, and it's forbidden to kill kids under any circumstances. And ask him to punish himself. I know the state will never punish him. Unfortunately, again, it's not a crime to kill a Palestinian in the Israeli system at all. And the Palestinian evidence, they said we never saw an Israeli soldier be punished because he killed a Palestinian, except Azaria 3 years ago for 9 months because he had been filmed and there is an Israeli Jewish witnesses. So I know where I am. And this guy, he didn't act, he didn't answer me because it's forbidden for him to talk to me. I believe in one day he will come to ask me to forgive him because we have a lot of examples, people that they cannot live with such a sin because they are human beings. Again, because they are human beings. So I believe he understands that he killed 10 years innocent girl in the other meeting after 2 months in the Israeli court. He cannot look at me and my wife. He understands that he killed 10 years innocent girl. And this was my revenge, because for me to kill him or to spend his life in jail, what I am going to gain from this? Nothing.
This is a question for both Gili and Bassam. You know, you all are both here because you have hope for some resolution, some ability for us to live together in Israel. Where do you get the hope, and what is your hope for?
It's a difficult question. It's for Gili.
I think there is. I think these questions we've been asked in almost every meeting, and I don't change my answer. I simply refuse to think or to agree that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict will be forever. If we look in history from just few, I don't know, dozens of years before, or before decades, or a long time ago, every conflict finally one day was in some way solved, even if it wasn't like a real peace. I'm not looking for peace now. I just want this conflict to end. And I can give you examples. We can look at what happened in England and Ireland, in France and Germany, in so many conflicts. Israel, my brother was killed in the 73 war, and just 4 years after that, Sadat came, and 2 years after that, there is peace between Israel and Egypt, between Israel and Jordan. Who could imagine that already in the early 50s, there will be a German embassy in Tel Aviv? So I simply refuse to accept the notion that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is something else. And then I also think, I don't think I'm, this kind of guy that has his hallucinations. I'm quite a realistic person, I think. But you should be also optimistic. Optimism is a very important thing. And sometimes you have to believe. I told you I'm atheist. I don't believe in God, but I believe in things. And I really sure it's just a matter of, maybe it's a matter of two brave leaders from both sides that could carry their people, or maybe it will be solved by another way. But I am sure this conflict will end one day.
In fact, I agree with Gili word by word, and it's not a matter of hope, with my respect to Mrs. Hope here. It's a fact. What's that mean? We are not going to kill each other forever. It's a fact. And always I said that the Palestinians didn't kill 6 million Israelis. And the Israelis didn't kill 6 million Palestinians. And as Gili says, there is a German ambassador in Tel Aviv, but there is an Israeli ambassador in Berlin. You know, if you are stuck in the past, you will never live the future. We are strong people. Can you imagine in one day, Israel will be a state after this long, thousands of years of weakness? Look back to the American society, 300 years. The Australians, the Canadians, South Africa. So yes, the Irish people, 800 years. In the end, the same agreement. And this is what's going to be here. We don't know when the same leaders will sign the same agreement, but how much blood we need to cook the conditions to sign this agreement. This is what we don't know, but we will live in peace. I hope I'm working to achieve peace for myself, not only for my grandsons, no, for myself. And believe me, every day become, in spite the difficult time that you saw, I believe it's less day in the age of the conflict.
So, Bassam, Gili, what would you ask of us as Americans, hearing about your conflict? And obviously we're familiar with it, but we tend to take sides in America, and we tend to be intractable in America. What would you ask of us in hearing about this for our steps to help?
You know, the biggest pain was for the Jews during the Second World War and before, because the world keeps silent and they don't know. And this is what we feel as Palestinians. For that, when I watch the movie of Spielberg, it's not to compare, but in that time, how I was taught, then I discovered years after that the director of this movie is a Jew. For me, Jewish is the enemy, even if in Canada or in the States. And I wish to meet Steven Spielberg to convince him to make a movie about the Palestinians, so the world will see us and start to cry about our tragedy. And the dream become true. Last year, there is a book called Paragon, if you hear about it, by Callum McCann, the Irish-American writer. He wrote a book about us, about me and Rami Hanan from the Parent Circle and the Parent Circle. And Steven Spielberg bought the rights of this book, and he read my dream to meet him and to ask him to make a movie. And I believe this book will be a movie in general about our stories, but about the conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians from a human point of view. So, you know, the Americans, if you ask any Palestinian, the normal Palestinians who don't understand in politics, they will say our enemy is United States. it's unconditional support to Israel. They care about Israel, security of Israel, but they don't care about us. Why? We don't understand that. So I believe those days we can see a little change, and especially in the Jewish community. We can see this voice, the reasonable voice, the moral voice, to say, yes, we care about Israel, but we want Israel as a moral state. We will never support the occupation. If you believe in democracy, it's for both sides. If you believe in human rights, it's both sides, especially freedom. You know, the Jewish suffered from this slavery thousands of years. So they need to appreciate, and it's the biggest value in Judaism. You cannot celebrate freedom while you detain 4 million of people in that day. So I believe the Americans, always we said, we don't ask you to be pro-Israelis and to be pro-Palestinians. We ask you to be pro-peace, justice, humanity for everyone. And of course, you can support us by educating yourself, because many of Americans, they support Israel not because they are bad people, because they support human rights. They support, it's the only democracy in the Middle East, surrounded with those brutal Arabs waiting for the opportunity to eat those blunt people. It means for a good reason, but you need to understand that you support the only occupation in this area. We are not going to throw Israel to the sea, and we are not going to disappear. Believe me, both people, they forget to die. We will survive, we will exist, but we need to exist in peace and security for both sides. So support peace. Then you can support the Israelis and the Palestinians. Don't support the occupation, don't support the oppression, because it's against your values, at least as Jewish, and against Americans' slogans for human rights. So we can see the Jews fighting for democracy and human rights and equality, anti-apartheid everywhere around the world. When it's come to Israel, it's another issue. And this is a big mistake, because for me as a Palestinian, and I hate, like, for me, nationalism, it's kind of racism, believe me. I release myself from this type of nationalism. I am very proud that I'm a human being, which is very difficult to be a human being those days. I care about the Israelis and the Palestinians. They have the right to exist, and we have the right to exist. But I don't want even my brother Gili to occupy me and to manage my life. I want to live my own life as I want to live, and to live in my state and my personal state. I want to send my kids to their school and get them back safe whenever I live.
Bassam, Gili, I know we've gone a little bit more, and I'm appreciative of your time and the hour where you are. Are there any concluding thoughts that you might have for us?
You know, because I am not the general manager now, I have no problem to say, please support us, please. You know, it's very expensive country, even the transportation before COVID, but it starts to be open now. Sometimes the dialogue meeting to meet with a young Palestinians for the first time ever, they meet someone like Gili. He was in Kahana movement, like the worst for them. And today he changed his mind. He see them as human beings. He believe in peace. It's unbelievable. You need to understand the effect of this meeting for those young Palestinians. Sometimes it cost us more than $2,000, and we are a very poor organization. So at least if you support us financially, and we will sacrifice our time and our effort to make the work on the ground. You know, I was in the States many times with other people, and almost I can run a service in the synagogue in Shabbat. And the biggest support for us come from the States. We have the American Friends of the Parent Circle, Sherry Orion, she's amazing, based in Seattle. You can also visit our website where you can see our activities in the States. I believe in October, we will be there in I think in the DC, in Seattle, in Boston, New York, in Connecticut. So you can follow us, you can invite us to your community, to your synagogue. You can organize a fundraising meeting, for example. Over than that, we don't ask you to come and to fight with us physically, but please, you can come to visit us physically and to see on the ground what's happening exactly. We are not only me and Gili. We have thousands of Palestinians and Israelis. It's very difficult for us to meet right now. In spite of that, we meet each other and always we renew our commitment. We have a lot of activities with young people from both sides. They're the first time. We enter to schools, more than 1,000 lectures each year. Women groups, Israelis and Palestinians. Imagine the same women's in the media, they support her son when he go to the army, and the other support him when he go to a Palestinian organization. You will discover those lies and those brave women. No one dream to send her son to the army, and no one dream for her son to be in jail or to be killed. This is the biggest support for me physically, to come and to visit us. And of course, don't forget to support us financially. It's very important.
Thank you. Well, on behalf of the temple and Rabbi David and everyone else here, I do want to say thank you so very, very much for your time. Greatly appreciate it. I've shared your organization in our chat for anybody who might want to see it, and Benji can set that out in a link to all. So on behalf of us, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us.
And good evening in Jericho and in Tel Aviv.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Gili. Shana Tova.
בסאם, תודה. חג שמח.
תודה. Thank you.
Thank you for the information.